This is The Small Town Guide to Self-Reinvention, written and read by Christopher J. Jones. Jenna Mae McAvoy, a widow of 63, knew how to properly arrange a fashion scarf, but on this Monday morning she had purposely tied hers as she had done her old Girl Scout scarf, with a knot that could survive the wind of her passage on a bicycle, or the blast of a hurricane if it came to that. A tornado was much more likely than a hurricane here in Anniston, Alabama, but the knot on the scarf was not intended as proof against weather. It was intended to frustrate and delight the other ladies of the Scarf Club in the movie viewing room at the public library. It had so happened that on the very first day of her self-reinvention project, some 3 years ago, on the first Monday after taking early retirement, she had worn a similar scarf, similarly tied, to her first appearance at the weekly noon movie viewing. The movie was selected from the library's video collection and was screened free of charge to an audience of people who weren't at work on Mondays. Retirees, probably, but Jenna Mae didn't like to assume, though you could assume a lot from the prevalence of snowy white hair on the heads of the attendees, and the canes and walkers clutched in the hands of many. Jenna Mae had been nervous about trying to meet people, but that problem had vanished when the members of the Scarf Club, then numbering 3, had spotted her and her scarf. She didn't even like scarves, but she had worn one on a lucky whim, a tentative step toward being daring and unpredictable, of saying, "Hey y'all, it's me, Jenna Mae, but different." Her signal, as small as it had seemed at home, had been received and then answered with gratifying abundance at the first opportunity. The girls, none of whom she had ever seen before, had summoned her to their table and their tribe with loud familiar cries, and had told her that her seat was waiting for her, and that had been her seat and her Monday club ever since. It had quickly become apparent that Jenna Mae was not cut from the same fashion-forward cloth as the other members of the club. This fact was most plainly broadcast by the way her scarf was cinched around her neck, but there were other signs. While overwhelming her at that first encounter with introductions and a quick summary of their 10 years' worth of gossip, the girls had busied themselves with untying her scarf, fluffing and arranging it properly, and doing something with every bit of her outfit and hair, and even taking small liberties with deft sketches of makeup, until she felt like the Cowardly Lion in the Emerald City Beauty Parlor, with hands beautifying her everywhere at once, swiftly making her one of them. Had she not been primed for reinvention, she might have resisted this unbidden sartorial pit stop, but she had relaxed into it, and it had resulted in her feeling stylish, resplendent, ready to lean out over the waves like a ship's figurehead. Astonishing, given how quick the treatment had been, and how the girls had mostly just rearranged what was already there. They had all then talked and laughed loudly all the way through the movie, which was not even a comedy, and she had been helpless to resist joining in, even though she felt like they were all making a spectacle. She wasn't that kind of person at all, but then, wasn't that the point of reinventing oneself? To do away with, or at least modify, the old self. 3 years on from that first meeting, Jenna Mae had moved in the girls' direction just a bit, making slight upgrades to her hair and wardrobe, but even so, outwardly she was still very much her old self. The real difference in Jenna Mae, this far into reinvention, was her enhanced awareness of and acceptance of where she stood in relation to the world. That may not sound like much, but if you had spent most of a lifetime becoming a wife and a mother and a teacher, then you woke up one day and found that you are a widow and your children have gone and your career is over, what exactly are you? Lacking the old external imperatives, What now motivates you to get out of bed? Do you sit around waiting for some new role or fate to befall you? Or do you make your own fate? Which is more important, a handy label or how you get through the next hour? This one coming up right now. Do you want to float haphazardly like a falling leaf? Or attain some semblance of controlled flight on what is, after all, an inexorably downward glide path? Jenna May, being a philosophical sort with time on her hands at home, had started asking herself such questions 5 years ago when Mac died. And while she had developed some hypotheses and ways to cope with life on her own, she was still looking for answers. For the first 2 years, she had continued teaching by day and grieving by night, a neat arrangement with herself that had excused her from really focusing on the questions. That was probably a good thing, she later realized, for just as you should not shop for food when your stomach is empty, you should not seek the ultimate meaning of life when your soul is in tatters. The selections you make when in either condition are liable to fill the emptiness with haphazard quantities of dubious quality. After surviving those first 2 years alone and realizing that she might have quite a lot of path down which to glide, she had hit upon the idea of reinvention as a way to move forward. This was evidently not an original idea, for long before that, just a few months into her widowhood, helpful friends had started pushing books and films at her, with heartfelt squinting of eyes and whispering of words that had implied that these artifacts were suitable blueprints for the rest of her life. The books were of the grab the life by the scruff of the neck variety, though one of the less ambitious ones had used all of its 300 pages to explain how to achieve optimum hydration. The films she was given often featured a formerly shy woman having an epiphany and abandoning her humdrum life and cutting a bawdy swath through one or more European countries, or setting her cap for a late middle-aged male professor and incidentally slaking her hitherto undiagnosed thirst for culture. Or, in one case of confusing messaging, coming as it did from a friend, committing crimes and driving her car and herself over the lip of a deep canyon on purpose, laughing all the way, ha ha ha. Jenna May had resolved never to get into a car with the friend who gave her that film. None of those options had appealed to Jenna May, nor had any currently popular program offered in the reinvention vertical of the self-help industrial complex. Every program advocated fanciful and expensive extremes requiring attendance at pep rallies, purchase of frequently revised guidebooks, or subscriptions to monthly magazines, since, apparently, you should not expect to achieve full reinvention for 1 or more 12 months, during which time the rules may very well change, and patronage of a line of branded lifestyle goods. She wondered whether any philosophy of life whose commandments included following one and only one skin moisturizing regimen, forsaking all others, ought to be taken seriously. She was supposed to buy into one of these programs on a teacher's pension, even one supplemented by a modest life insurance payout? Please. Her idea of reinvention involved neither selling all of her possessions, nor exotic travel, nor danger, nor looking in unlikely places to find the rare golden nugget of a super appealing yet miraculously unattached gentleman of her own approximate vintage and still able to drive at night, nor using different bath products. Besides, what if the more radical forms of reinvention didn't take, and she was left to find a way back home, assuming she had not sold the home to fund the reinvention? Caution dictated having a backup plan, and since that plan would likely involve making do where you were and with what you had, why not make that the primary plan? And so for many reasons, Jenna May had preferred, if possible, to self-reinvent in place and on a reasonable budget, using, as the Scarf Club girls would eventually demonstrate in the area of fashion, the materials at hand. Since there were no books or movies celebrating such an incremental and parsimonious style of reinvention, she had decided to wing it. What she had come up with 3 years ago was not exactly a role or a fate, but simply a resolve to seek new experiences and develop new relationships, and to start each day with the realization that she owned her time, every minute of it. A less philosophical person might sum up Jenna May's 2 years of planning and the effort she had made starting 3 years ago as someone simply deciding to quit her job, to get out of the house a few days a week, and to do as she pleased. Jenna May realized that, of course, and was very glad that she had never been the kind of person who announces grandiose life plans to others, only to be embarrassed when the execution doesn't live up to the advanced billing. Sometimes reinvention is more about taking stock of your life and everything in it, and deciding what to leave behind, what to keep, and what to seek out, than it is about changing randomly or drastically for the sake of change. Certainly, it should not be done as a performance to please others. Jenna May was content for her reinvention to be rather low-key and to take as long as it took, and for it to be her secret. It was actually more fun that way, since it added a small but giddiness-inducing element of intrigue to everything she did. As a result, she occasionally had to wave away friends who wanted to know what she was smirking at. Nothing, she would say as she wrestled her facial expression into line. I just had a funny thought. Now, what were you saying? Her friends' efforts weren't wasted, though. They had inadvertently provided blueprints that had helped Jenna May decide what not to do. Except for the hydration book. That one had turned out to be useful in the positive sense. There were worse foundational steps to reinvention than trying to drink more water, and it suited her both philosophically and financially. Was it going too far to elevate the act of turning on the kitchen faucet into an element of a self-reinvention plan? Not if you had a book backing you up, or if you simply wanted to. She was, after all, winging it. Although she had gradually upped her fashion game to a point that felt right for her, she had been happy to embrace her status as mascot of the Scarf Club, the one who is not quite like the others, like the tomboy who tags along with the sorority girls and is treated as an adored pet, forever needing a touch-up. So yes, she could in fact arrange a fashion scarf credibly on her own, but she owed it to the girls to show up every week with at least that part of her outfit in need of their ministrations. It was a victory for her and for them if something on her person should cause one or more of them to utter any of the words farmer's daughter, rodeo, county fair, Laura Ingalls Wilder, or Ma Kettle as they fussed over her during the first few minutes of their weekly meeting. It gave the girls something to lament and try to fix, and it pleased Jenna May to show that she was still, even under their influence, just a small-town girl. Later on this Monday, driving home from the library after the movie, her scarf now demonstrating casual elegance and her jacket sporting a loner brooch pinned onto her shortly after her arrival, Jenna May smiled, suffused with the usual happy feeling that it gave her to play the part of little sister for a few hours once a week. Was making friendships that had lasted 3 years and counting something you could claim as a step toward reinvention? Well, if you could count turning on the water faucet more often as a step, which she had done, good move, setting the bar low right at the start, then certainly the Scarf Club should count too. She thought the whole business with the girls might amuse Rigoberto. So she put it on her mental list of potential things to tell him about. She had to be selective because their time together was limited, and conversations were correspondingly brief. No rush, though. She had until late Thursday night to decide.